Welcome this morning. My name is Dr. Timothy Egan, and I'm your proud superintendent and educational leader here in Kings Park. Thank you for joining us for our Kings Park Community Memorial Walk and 9/11 20th commemoration. Take a minute and look around. It's great to see probably between 500 and 600 Kings Parkers come out and join us this morning. We're going to have a few short speeches, followed by the reading of approximately 500 names of individuals from Nassau and Suffolk County, first responders who lost their lives on 9/11. And we're going to end this morning with Kings Park Marching Band playing America the Beautiful for us. So again, we have a few short speeches. As I'm sure is the case for many of you, today is a bittersweet day in my life. There are events in history that are forever etched in our memory. And for many of us, 9/11 is on that short list. Like you, I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing that morning when the towers fell. However, members of our community, including all of our students, were not even born when this tragedy occurred. As your educational leader these past 7 years, I have endeavored to ensure that we never forget. 9/11 is always a sad day for me personally because I lost a good friend, James Riley, who died when the first tower collapsed at 8:46 a.m. He was at work that day. Today, however, has a very sweet side to it. First, we began this event about 30 or 45 minutes ago by walking past the newly installed Field of Flags at Kings Park High School. I want to personally thank the Butler, Cristiano, and Barbarite families for designing and implementing what already includes 300 flags, but will be an ongoing endeavor. I also want to thank our grounds crew for assisting with the installation and all of the community residents. We had about 100 who came out to put the flags in the ground the day before school started. Second, I'd like to call Frank Segreto to the podium, and I'd like to personally thank Frank, his family, and Troop 539 for successfully renovating our 9/11 memorial, which hopefully you saw on your way in. Frank also helped us to organize this event, and Frank wanted to say a few words of thanks to the community.
Hello, everyone. As you may know, I'm Frank Segreto. It was my project to refurbish the 9/11 memorial, as you see behind you. I know it's a hot day. I know we got a lot to get through, so I just want to say thank you to a few people that really helped me along the way. First and foremost, my friends, my family, and my Troop 539 for helping me with the actual construction of the project. I know it was a very hot few weeks. It was very hard and very tiring, but I really appreciate all your help. I couldn't have done this without you guys. Second, Dr. Egan and the Board of Ed. They're the ones who gave me the green light for this project, and if it wasn't for them, none of this would be happening today. And second, just all you guys. I have gotten so much positive reinforcement for this project, so much support, so many volunteers, so much donations, and I really appreciate every single one of you guys. And I hope today, even though it's a sad day, you find some light in the day. Yeah, that's it.
And lastly, and most importantly, I personally want to thank all of you, the members of the Kings Park community who came out to participate in this event today. Today we stand together, much like we did in the days and weeks following the 9/11 tragedy. Importantly, we don't stand today as Democrats or Republicans. We don't stand today as conservatives or liberals. We don't stand today as those that are for or against masks or anything else that would seek to divide this community. But rather, we stand here strong today as Americans and members of the Kings Park family. And that we should never forget either. I'd like to call up our amazingly supportive Town of Smithtown Supervisor, Ed Wareheim, who would like to say a few words.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Egan. First, let me say that I'm honored to join my fellow Kings Park residents this morning for this solemn event. They asked me to say a few words, so I thought maybe I would relay to you what we have sent out from the town of Smithtown, myself, the town board, and all elected officials. Today, we honor the lives, legacies, and memories of those we lost, the families left behind, our first responders, and our survivors, the terrorist attacks on September 11th, 2001. Today, we remember how the very worst of humanity was met by the very best. We remember letting the light of hope shine again through kindness, charity, and acts of selflessness and decency. Let us remember together today and each day forward. God bless America.
And our last speech this morning, Lisa McDermott, would like to say a few words on behalf of the community. Lisa.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to represent Kings Park today. We have our own heroes here in Kings Park that rushed toward the tower on that fatal day on 9/11. It speaks a lot of a person who could run toward danger to help save their fellow man without hesitation or concern of their own safety. We as Kings Parkers are proud of our first responders. So if you're a fireman, active or retired, please stand as our Kings Park community would like to take appreciation and love and thank you for your day, for your service. If you're a police officer, active or retired, please stand so we could show our love and appreciation. If you're an EMT, active or retired, please stand so we could show our love and appreciation. And if you are in the military, all branches, active or retired, please stand so we could show our love and appreciation for you fighting the evil for you have fought the evil that tried to infiltrate our freedom. Everyone, please understand and acknowledge all the people who have stood here and know as Kings Parkers, we are so proud of you and we are Kings Park strong. Thank you, everybody, and God bless you.
I'd like to now turn the mic over to Commander Ken Dolan.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ken Dolan. I'm the commander of the Donald C. Monroe Post 944 here in Kings Park. I'm a U.S. Army veteran and United States Coast Guard retiree, but foremost, I'm a retired lieutenant from the New York City Fire Department. And many of these names of these first responders from New York City I either worked with or trained. And one name that just doesn't make our list because he comes from the community just over the Nassau line in Rockaway. And his name was Stephen Elliott Belson. He came to me his first day on the job in 1980. He came up to me, he says, "I think I'm going to be an asset to you, Lieutenant." He says, "I've had experience as being a New York City lifeguard in the Rockaway beaches." I says, "Oh," I said, "Where did you train?" He says, "At the Old Bath on 54th Street." I says, "Who trained you?" He says, "Lou," and he was thinking for the last name, and I said, "Lipsky?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "Well, Lou Lipsky trained me as a lifeguard about 15 years prior to you." So we hit it off right from then. And when I went to transfer out of the unit, Ladder 24 in Manhattan, he begged me to stay. And he got hurt after that. And Chief Oriole Palmer said, "Listen, the job will put you out. How about becoming my aide?" Well, he became Chief Oriole Palmer's aide. And both of them perished on 9/11. And I'll never forget Steve. He was a wonderful young man. He grew up as an Orthodox Jew, and he came onto the fire department. He sort of relaxed for being an Orthodox Jew, but he never lost his Jewish heritage. And at his memorial service in Rockaway, there was about 5 minutes of Jewish pomp and circumstance, and the rest of it was all Irish, because all of his friends from the lifeguard crew that he worked with were mostly Irish, and he got them to join the New York City Fire Department. So I'll always remember Steve. Right now, I'm going to read the names of the readers, and I'll have them wave their hands so that you know who they are. Our first reader is Legislator Rob Trotter. Second reader is Dr. Timothy Egan. Our third reader is Mr. Kevin O'Hare. Our fourth reader is Ms. Evelyn Nolan. Our fifth reader is Ms. Susan Alvar. Our sixth reader is Mr. Philip Barzak. Our seventh reader is Mr. Tony Tanzi. Our eighth reader is Mr. Edward Werheim, our supervisor. Our ninth reader is Commander Diane Gardner, U.S. Navy. Our 10th reader is Mr. John Carmen, retired Sergeant Major, U.S. Army. Our 11th reader is Mr. Walter Sefka, retired U.S. Marines. Our 12th reader is Mr. Hans Richter, U.S. Marine veteran. Our 13th reader is Ms. Elaine Butler. And our 14th reader is retired Lieutenant William Maynard, FDNY. Our 15th reader is Ms. Kim Revere. And last but not least is Mrs. Elaine Regina, my daughter, who I love immensely. Thank you.
Marie Abed. Andrew C. Abate. Vincent Abate. Richard Asino. Christopher Amato. David Angus. Joanne Adalapius. Joseph Amachiano. Joseph Anjanciato. Janice Ashley. Arzina Aliz. Robert Brierwalter. Joseph Barbella. Scott Bark. Lawrence Beck. Alvin Bergshine. Joshua Birnbaum. Janice Blanley. Craig Blass. Bruce Boham. Lawrence Basinino. Jerry Borg. Kimberly Bowers. Michelle Bratton. Linda Bravano. Francis Brennan. Thomas Brennan, Herman Broghammer, Bettina Brown Radburn, and Richard Bruhart.
Dennis Buckley, Nancy C. Busey, Timothy G. Byrne, Michael J. Cahill, Rocco Camash, Jonathan N. Capello, James C. Cappers, Richard M. Caproni, Joyce A. Caprento, Paul R. Cassio, Judson Cavalier, Jason M. Cefalo, Joni Sesta, William Chalkoff, Christopher C. Fardini, Susan M. Klein, Mark J. Caleo, Stephen J. Caleo, Kevin N. Colbert, Robert D. Collin, Thomas J. Collins, Ronald E. Comer, James L. Connor, Jonathan M. Connors, Joseph A. Corbett, Kevin M. Cosgrove, Michael S. Costello, Timothy J. Coughlin, James E. Cove, Michelle T. Coyle-Alau.
Thomas G. Crotty, Neil J. Cutmore, Lawrence D. Curia, Vincent G. DiMatteo, Manuel D'Amato, William T. Dean, Robert J. DeAngelis Jr., Tara E. DeBeck, Anna M. Debin, Andrea B. Della Bella, Thomas F. Dennis Sr., Michael L. DiAgostino, Judith B. Diaz Sierra, Joseph D. Dickey Jr., William J. Dimling, Carlos Dominicus, Jacqueline Donovan, Jennifer L. Dorsey Howley, Michael J. Duffy, Christopher J. Dunn, Patrick T. Dwyer, Robert D. Eaton, Paul R. Eckner, Dennis M. Edwards, Michael H. Edwards, Eric A. Eisenberg, Erwin L. Erker, William Esposito, Keith G. Fairbairn, and William L. Fallon, Jr.
Dolores Finelli, Thomas B. Farrelly, Robert J. Ferris, Andrew Fisher, Ryan D. Fitzgerald, Richard P. Fitzsimmons, Stephen M. Fogel, Anna Fosters, Jeffrey Fox, Morton H. Frank, Peter C. Frank, Brett O. Freeman, Arlene E. Freed, Andrew K. Friedman, Anthony E. Gallagher, David Garcia, William A. Gardner, Paul H. Gear, Peter V. Genco Jr., James G. Geyer, Stephen A. Giorgetti, Cynthia A. Giuliano, Jeffrey G. Goldflam, Olga K. Gould White, Lieutenant Commander Gilbert F. Granados, Winston A. Grant, Wade B. Green, David Grimner, Linda Gronland, and Matthew J. Grzymowski.
Michael L. Hannon, James A. Harron, Timothy A. Haviland, Gary Herold, Thomas A. Hobbs, Ronald G. Horner, Stephen G. Hoffman, Leroy Homer, James P. Hopper, Michael J. Horn, Chris R. Hughes, Robert R. Husa, Michael P. Eichen, Douglas J. Ergang, Christy A. Irvine Ryan, Aram Iskandarian, John F. Iskayan, Brooke A. Jackman, Jake D. Jagoda, Maximum Jean-Pierre, Christopher D. Jones, Robert T. Jordan, Jane E. Hagan Josiah, Thomas E. Jurgens, Douglas G. Karpoloff, John A. Katsimatides, Frederick H. Kelly Jr., James J. Kelly, Joseph A. Kelly, Timothy C. Kelly.
Glenn D. Kerwin, Ryan Cohart, Frederick Q.O. Jr., Amanthea Lockman, Stephen Ella Mantilla, Gary H. Lee, Edward J. Liebman, David Listerman, John R. Lenore, Mary C. Lentz Weinman, Jeffrey E. Levine, Neil D. Levin, Robert M. Levine, Ralph M. Licardi, Martin Lizu, Elizabeth C. Logler, Catherine L. Loguthi, Salvatore Lopes, Charles P. Lacanthia, Joseph E. Lunder, Farrell P. Lynch, Louis A. Lynch, Sean P. Lynch, Noel C. Mraz, Brian McGee, Charles W. McGee, Thomas A. Manhome, Joseph D. Mayo, Alfred R. Mailer, Deborah M. Mantilla.
Terrence J. Manning, Laura A. Marchese, Edward J. Mardovich, Lester V. Marino, Vita M. Marino, Jose A. Martinez Jr., Stephen F. Massey, Rudolph Mastrocinque, William A. Matheson, Brendan F. McCabe, Justin J. McCarthy, Michael D. McCarthy, Matthew T. McDermott, Catherine M. McGarry Nowak, Ann W. McGovern, Patrick J. McGuire, Thomas M. McHale, Robert C. McLaughlin Jr., Rocco A. Medaglia, Alok K. Mehta, Stuart T. Meltzer, Ralph J. Mercurio, George Mercouris, Jill A. Metzler, Joel Miller, Charles M. Mills Jr., Joseph D. Mistrulli, Frank V. Mosia Sr., Craig D. Montano, and Dorothy Morgan.
Michael J. Mullen, James D. Munhall, Kevin J. Murphy, James F. Murphy IV, Manika K. Narula, Karen S. Navarro, Lawrence F. Nadell, Michelle A. Nelson, Frank J. Neistat Jr., John B. Niven, Jeffrey R. Nussbaum, Michael P. O'Brien, Timothy M. O'Brien, Matthew T. O'Mahony, Peter J. O'Neill Jr., Patrick J. O'Shea, Gerald M. Alcott, Maureen L. Olson, Michael C. Opperman, Peter K. Ortali, James R. Otrowski, Peter J. Owens Jr., Richard A. Palazzolo, Christopher M. Panettiere, Edward J. Papa, Michael J. Pascuma Jr., Horace R. Passananti, Avnesh R. Patel, Dipti J. Patel, Bernard E. Patterson.
Thomas Pedicini, Anthony Perez, Joseph J. Perencino, Edward J. Parada, Imelda H. Perry, Lawrence M. Palach, Steve Policino, Richard N. Poulos, John F. Puckett, Christopher Quackenbush, Harry A. Rains, Lorenzo E. Ramsey, Gerard F. Rousey, Gregory Rita, James B. Riley, Kenneth F. Rice III, Donald A. Robeson, Joseph M. Romagnolo, Mark H. Rosen, Brooke D. Rosenbaum, Andrew I. Rosenblum, Bart J. Ruggieri, Susan A. Ruggiero, Adam K. Ruhalter, Jonathan S. Ryan, Francis J. Sudoka, John S. Salerno, Jr., Wayne J. Solomon, Frank G. Salvatierra, Alva J. Sanchez.
John G. Scharf, Karen H. Schmidt, Frank G. Schott Jr., Edward W. Schunk, Mark Schwartz, Michael H. Seaman, Howard Selwyn, Jeffrey J. Shaw, Daniel J. Shea, Joseph P. Shea, John A. Sherry, Alan A. Schwartzstein, Diane T. Siner, David Silver, Peter A. Syracuse, Christopher P. Slattery, Robert S. Sliwak, James G. Smith, Daniel L. Smith II, Bonnie S. Smithwick, Donald F. Spampanato Jr., John A. Spataro, William E. Spitz, William V. Steckman, Eric J. Steen, Andrew Sturgiopoulos, Andrew L. Stern, Lonnie S. Stone, Thomas Strata.
James Swazi, Robert Sutcliffe, John F. Swain, Kevin T. Sock, Michael Todanino, Kirishiko Takahashi, Michael A. Tremunzio, Brian J. Terenzi, Brian P. Thompson, Glenn E. Thompson, Stephen E. Teague, Michael L. Titolino, Stephen K. Tomset, Daniel P. Trant, Diane M. Urban, John Vasio, Matthew C. Viana, Joseph J. Vignola Jr., Joshua S. Vitale, Gerald H. Vartanian.
Michelle L. Titola, Stephen K. Tomsat, Daniel P. Trant, Diane M. Urban, John D. Boccaccio, Matthew G. Viana, Frank J. Vignola Jr., Joshua S. Vitale, Garo H. Vaskerjarian, Glenn J. Wall, Mitchell S. Wallace, John Wallace Jr., Derek C. Washington, Charles Waters, Dinah Webster, Stephen Weinberg, Oli D. Wengerchuk, Kevin M. Williams, Crossley R. Williams Jr., Donna A. Wilson, William E. Wilson, Glenn J. Winnock, Frank P. Wisniewski, David Wiswall, Michael R. Wittenstein, John W. Wright Jr., Joseph C. Ziccoli, Ira Zaslow, Prokopios Zois, Joseph J. Zucala, and Andrew S. Zucker. That is the conclusion of the civilian victims from that day. It's worth noting that they were never grouped by race, religion, gender, or political affiliation. They perished as Americans. Never forget.
The Fire Department of New York. Brian G. Ahern, James M. Amato, Joseph Angelini Jr., Joseph J. Angelini Sr., David G. Arce, Frank Bodonomo, Gary R. Box, Michael Boyle, Peter Brennan, Daniel J. Brethel, Andrew C. Brune, William F. Burke Jr., Donald J. Burns, my brother Thomas M. Butler, George C. Kane, Dennis M. Carey Sr., Michael S. Carlo, Michael J. Cowley, Nicholas P. Chiafalo, Stephen Coakley, John A. Chrissy, Dennis Cross, Thomas P. DeAngelis, Martin N. DeMeo, Andrew J. D. Spirito, Kevin W. Donnelly, Raymond M. Downey Sr., Gerard J. Duffy, Robert E. Evans, John J. Fanning, Thomas J. Farino, Terrence P. Farrell, Lee S. Failing, Andre G. Fletcher, John J. Florio, David J. Fontana, Robert J. Fody, and my father, Captain William E. Butler, who passed from 9/11 related illness.
Thomas Gambino, Jr., Peter J. Gansey, Jr., Thomas A. Gardner, Bruce H. Gary, Edward F. Garrity, Vincent F. Giamona, Ronnie E. Geis, Jeffrey E. Gia, David Haldeman, Timothy S. Haskell, Timothy T. Haskell, Jr., Terrence S. Hatton, Michael H. Hobb, Philip T. Hayes, Michael K. Healy, Thomas J. Hetzel, Brian C. Hickey, Timothy B. Higgins, Joseph G. Hunter, Jonathan L. Ielpi, William R. Johnston, Andrew B. Jordan, Anthony M. Hovick, Thomas R. Kelly, Thomas J. Kennedy, Jr., Ronald T. Kerwin, Michael V. Kiefer, Robert C. King, Jr., Thomas J. Kovikas, Peter J. Langone, Carlos R. Gillo, Robert T. Linane, Michael F. Lynch, Patrick J. Lyons, William J. Mahoney, Jr., Joseph E. Maloney, and Kenneth J. Marino.
Peter C. Martin, Brian G. McAleese, William J. McGovern, Terrence A. McShane, Martin E. McWilliams, Raymond Meisenheimer, Charles R. Mendez, Henry A. Miller Jr., Thomas Mingione, Manuel D. Mojica Jr., Michael G. Montesi, Thomas C. Moody, Richard T. Muldowney Jr., John P. Napolitano, Peter A. Nelson, Dennis P. Oberg, Daniel O. Callahan, Michael J. Totten, Oreo J. Palmer, John M. Palillo, Robert Parrow, Darrell V. Pearsall Jr., Kevin M. Pryor, Richard A. Prunty, Lincoln Quapp, Edward J. Rawl, Adam D. Rank, Robert M. Regan, Joseph R. Ravelli Jr., Matthew Rogan, Michael T. Russo Sr., Matthew L. Ryan, Dennis Scorzo, Patrick J. O'Keefe, Kevin M. O'Rourke, Douglas E. Oschlager.
Gerard P. Schrang, Stephen G. Siller, Stanley S. Smagala Jr., Kevin J. Smith, Robert W. Spear Jr., Lawrence T. Stack, Gregory Stayek, Christopher P. Sullivan, Brian E. Sweeney, John J. Tipping II, John T. Vigiano II, Patrick J. Waters Jr., Kenneth T. Watson, David M. Weiss, Glenn E. Wilkinson, William Wren, Raymond R. York. The following members of the New York City Police Department: Michael S. Curtin, Vincent Dans, Jerome M. P. Dominguez, Mark J. Ellis, Robert Fazio Jr., Ronald P. Kloifer, Thomas M. Langone, Brian G. McDonald, John W. Perry, Glenn K. Pettit, Claude D. Richards, Timothy A. Roy Sr., Paul Talty, Joseph V. Vigiano, Walter E. Weaver. The following members of the Port Authority Police Department: George G. Howard, Paul W. Jurgens, Kathy N. Maza Deloche, James A. Nelson, Antonio J. Rodriguez, and Walwyn W. Stewart, Jr.
That concludes the reading of the names from Nassau and Suffolk, including the FDNY, the NYPD, and the PAPD. I'd be remiss if I didn't announce to you that we have Commander Gardner here, who's a decorated war veteran of the Afghanistan conflict. She was responsible as a team leader of a group of medical staff that saved countless lives in Afghanistan. So I think she deserves a round of applause.